Hi, welcome to Wellness Live. We're really glad you joined us. My name is Dr. Olivia Moses, and we are very excited to have you here today. Today's session is brought to you by the Living Whole Wellness Program here at Loma Linda University Health. I am very excited to introduce you to Tina Pruna. Tina Pruna has been with the organization for 4.5 years, and she is the director of the Community Academic Partners in Service. And she is here to talk to you about serving and self and how service can actually impact your life. We're very excited to hear about this topic. So get all your questions ready and make sure you type them in as soon as you think of them, because we will be back here in 10 minutes to ask her some questions live. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Tina Pruna.
Thank you so much, Olivia. It's an honor to be here today talking to you about something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is service or volunteerism. As Dr. Moses mentioned, I work for the Community Academic Partners in Service Office, or CAPS office for short. And the thing that we do here at Loma Linda is to connect students and staff to meaningful community outreach opportunities. And so today, as we end our time here in about 30 minutes, I'm hoping that you're learning a few things, one of which is learning a few ways that volunteerism can impact your health, describing the impact volunteerism has on your community, and also naming one way that you yourself can volunteer with Loma Linda or your community. And so before we get started, we're going to describe and define what volunteerism actually is. There's many terms that can be used interchangeably. One is volunteer, another one is service, another one is altruism. It really depends the industry that you're in. Here at Loma Linda, we tend to use the word service a bit more, but we're going to be using the word volunteer and service interchangeably. So to volunteer means essentially to act and help others. It's the action of helping or performing work free of charge that's not part of one's normal work responsibilities. So, for example, if you work overtime and you don't get paid for that, we're not saying that that qualifies as volunteerism. Volunteerism is something that's not part of your regular work responsibilities. And the United Nations has a really great description of volunteerism that I think is good to start out with. And they describe volunteerism as an essential component for the sustainable, equitable progress of communities and nations. In a rapidly changing environment, volunteerism is a constant. It is not a panacea to the problems of the world today. It is, however, an essential component of any strategy that recognizes that progress cannot be measured solely in terms of economic return, and that individuals are not motivated by self-interest alone, but also their deeply held values and belief. I think this is a really powerful statement to start out with because, one, it shows you that volunteerism isn't just something that you do on your time off. It's something that's actually tracked and measured and studied. And if you're interested, every few years the United Nations comes out with the State of the World's Volunteerism Report. And they have some really neat findings in there. So we're going to talk first about why we should serve, and there's many reasons that we should serve. But here at Loma Linda, I think why we feel that we serve is probably the most obvious, is we feel that it's a calling. It's something that is biblical, that's asked of us. Just by virtue of being a Christian and being a follower of Jesus, we should be serving others just as Jesus served us. And so these are a couple of my favorite scriptures that highlight why service is important. 1 Peter 4:10, each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. And Galatians 5, verse 13, for we are called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love to serve one another. And that's really why Loma Linda was established back in 1905. It's included in the meaning of our motto and our mission, which is to make man whole and to continue the teaching and healing ministry of Jesus. Essentially, it's what we do. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what the research says or what science says about serving. There's been many studies that have been done on this topic, and most of them have come with the same findings, that volunteerism is overall very impactful for yourself in these 4 areas. In health, volunteers tend to feel better both physically and emotionally. Volunteers report lower levels of stress in their lives. Volunteerism gives you a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning in your life. And volunteers tend to be more engaged in their community and more knowledgeable about what is going on in their community. A lot of research has been done on the role of volunteerism, particularly within the older generation or the elderly generation. One interesting thing to note that it's the baby boomer generation that is the generation that's most likely to volunteer. And so as that generation is entering retirement, we're going to have a really large number of volunteers that are available for service. And so it's important for you to know, if you yourself are a baby boomer or have somebody in your family, that there are significant health gains to be made just from volunteerism. In this study that I'm referencing here, they surveyed volunteers, or actually individuals aged 60 and up. And in this study, they were trying to determine what are some of the indicators that would reduce mortality or death. So they found that those individuals that volunteered had a significant reduction in mortality, 44%. And in fact, they were less likely to die than others that did other activities that were beneficial, such as exercising 4 times a week or attending a weekly religious service. And it was even more beneficial than just being physically mobile. We know for people that are elderly, it's important just to be able to get up and stand and walk around. And most importantly, the only area that volunteerism fell under in terms of a protective factor was smoking. The only thing better than volunteering is to not smoke in terms of reducing your lifespan. It's also important to note that the benefits for volunteerism, they tend to focus on baby boomers and the older generation because there's a significant change in your role in life as we get older. So our identities tend to become a little bit hazy as when you retire, when you no longer have a job description, you no longer maybe have a spouse, perhaps they passed away. And so volunteerism tends to give purpose a bit more to the older population. It's also really interesting to note that volunteerism, while it's always beneficial, it's particularly beneficial when you do it in a specific combination. So for the older population, they tend to get a better outcomes and have a better sense of contentment when they volunteer, not just with people their own age, but with the younger generation. It's a generation that they might not have regular access to. So if you think about it, if you're 70 years old, most of the people you interact with are going to be about your same age. It's the same things they may be going through in their life as you are, but when they volunteer with a younger generation, it gives them a sense of purpose, and they can share their own knowledge and their experience with somebody younger than them. There's also benefits in volunteerism for youth. Now, youth don't tend to have the same health benefits, but there are definite benefits for volunteering for youth. One study found that volunteerism led to significant diminished rates of depression for adolescents. And more than that, for adolescents, volunteerism is a really important part of their lives. It helps shape their future, it helps shape their career choices, and it really just, it's a building block for them in their future. Now, we've talked a little bit about how volunteerism impacts your health when you're healthy and when you're young, but what about if you're already sick? Is there any gains to be made in that area? And the answer is yes. There have been studies that have found that even among people that were seriously ill and had chronic illnesses, when they volunteered, their health actually became better. And this is something that could not have been caused or impacted by any sort of medical intervention. It was purely just by volunteering that they were able to decrease the amount of pain that they were in. So in this particular study, they had individuals that had chronic pain. They served as mentors and giving advice to others that had chronic pain. So just, if you can imagine with me, maybe a scenario you're more familiar with in movies or whatnot is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. They always have a sponsor. So they're referring to somebody that's been through their same struggle, that's gone through the same challenges that they have, and their sponsor is able to give them support and feedback and help them go through that same journey. So it's a very similar concept. Another study also found that among heart attack patients, those that volunteered were able to reduce their despair and depression, and they reported a greater sense of purpose in their lives. Now, mind you, these are not individuals that were out planting gardens or building houses with Habitat for Humanity. You know, their volunteerism was a little bit different in that they were mentoring and just being a support system for somebody else. Volunteerism also impacts our mental health. For this particular study, they surveyed over 3,000 individuals that had volunteered within the past year. And these volunteers reported an increase in mood over the last 12 months. 94% of them reported an increased mood. And 78% of these volunteers reported that their stress levels were lower. And overall, the volunteers reported just being more content and more relaxed in their life because of volunteerism. Volunteerism doesn't just impact your health and your well-being, it also impacts the community that we live in. This is data that was collected from the U.S. Census Bureau, and they have done studies on the connection between volunteering in your state and the health of your state. And so as you can see from this graph right here, these are the names of the states. And so you see the state of Utah, they have a pretty high volunteer rate, one of the highest actually, about 43%. They also have one of the lowest mortality rates. And there's another slide that looks very similar to this. Utah is also the first place winner in terms of rates for heart attacks. So they tend to have, Utah in general tends to have individuals that live longer and that have fewer heart attacks. And one of the reasons that they are reporting is because they have such a high rate of volunteerism. So just by you going out into your community, you're not only affecting yourself, but you're also changing the community that you live in. And I think this quote is pretty appropriate since it's an election year. Volunteering is the ultimate exercise in democracy. You vote in elections once a year, but when you volunteer, you vote every day about the kind of community you want to live in. So as with most things that sound really amazing, there tends to be a small little catch, and I don't want this to dissuade you, but I'm just telling you a little bit about what researchers have found. There was one study that reported in order to reach all of these gains, especially all of the great health gains, you have to commit about 2 hours per week to volunteering, or 100 hours of service per year. There was another survey that was done, another study that was done, and they reported only having to do about 40 hours per year. So that is a pretty big difference, but the one constant that you see here in both of these studies is that the volunteerism should be something that's consistent. So volunteering shouldn't just be something that you do on Christmas or Thanksgiving, but it should be a regular part of your life. And lastly, for those of you that are young and healthy and you're really not interested in your health, I would encourage you just to think of the need of the community when you're thinking of the reasons why you should serve. Every community has needs that we can attribute and that we can help with, but particularly the city of San Bernardino is 2-3 blocks away from us, and this is an area that we can make a significant impact on just in terms of health, in terms of educational outcomes. That's the area that my office tends to focus on for our community outreach because there's such a high need for volunteerism.
Okay, thank you, Tina. We have some questions, so if you have any more questions, please go ahead and type them in. The first question is here, do you have any tips on how to make service or volunteerism a part of everyday life, and should it be?
Absolutely, that's a great question, and we're going to touch a little bit on that in the next half of it. But I would suggest that just picking something that you're passionate about, and I absolutely think that volunteerism and service can be part of your everyday life. Just like anything, you have to work on it. Any good habit, I believe you have to do at least for 6 weeks, if I'm not misquoting that. So it's not going to come right away, but with practice, it can absolutely become part of your life.
Okay. Great. Another question is about families, volunteering as a family. What are the benefits? Are there benefits?
Yes, there are definite benefits. You're really just modeling a behavior for your family, and one of the reasons a lot of people don't volunteer is they don't know where to start. And so if you grow up with a mother or father that is constantly volunteering, you're more likely to do it. That's something that you're just going to have to get creative on doing. There's a lot of volunteer organizations in the area. There might be some age limits to specific service opportunities, but most people are pretty willing to accommodate a family, and they're more than happy to see the family together. When it makes for a great opportunity, not just for the family, but for the organization to show who's involved with their activities.
Right. We have another question here. I have some preteens at home. How can I facilitate a connection with volunteerism?
Yes, we have a lot of high schoolers and middle schoolers that seek to do outreach in the community. Probably the best time of year to do it is summer. That for you parents, that's not going to come as a huge surprise. But my suggestion is to start early and to be creative. Start with your dog shelters, start with general parks in the area, and most importantly, just start with your child and ask them what they want to do and what they want to gain from the experience. It shouldn't just be something that they check off their to-do list as a requirement for school, but you want it to be something that they enjoy doing.
Okay. Another thing here, and you might get to it later in the presentation, but what are some great opportunities to even just get started, like baby steps? What is the first step that people should do?
I would say the first step is just asking. Just get into the habit of even asking your neighbor or your coworker, is there something I can help you with? Or just listening, picking up on cues. If somebody says, they're struggling with completing something at home or something in their personal lives, that might be a great opportunity to lend a helping hand.
Okay, well, thank you. And again, if you have any more questions, please type them in, and we will be back in 10 minutes to ask Tina some more questions.
So now that we've discussed all of the benefits of volunteerism, we know that it's good for our health, we know that it's good for our minds, our sense of purpose, and that it's just a really good thing to do. You're meeting a need in the community. So the question some of you may be asking, if it's so great, why don't more people do it? And these are the 4 things that I have found to be the biggest barriers to service. So a few years ago, we did a huge survey among our students here at Loma Linda. We surveyed over 900 of them, and these were the top barriers that they listed to service. And most of these are pretty relevant, I think, for anyone, no matter what your age is. The number one reason that people don't volunteer is lack of time. If you're a full-time student, or you may be, a full-time worker, you may be a mother, have a family to take care of, you can't possibly find time in your day to fit this in. That's the number one reason I get for why people don't volunteer. The second barrier to service, you may have the desire, but as some of the questions Olivia just asked me, you might not know where to go to find out what opportunities are available to you. One of the other barriers to service is friends and family don't serve. So you haven't seen this behavior modeled. It's something that you're not familiar with. So it's kind of peer pressure in a way. But this can be flipped on its side. If you find your friends and family that are willing to go with you, then you'll be more likely to continue serving in the future. And I know for high school students, middle school students, and even our students, transportation can also be a big barrier. If you don't have a car, or if the place that you're serving does not have a bus system that goes next to it, then it might be a little bit harder to access. So those are the barriers that we tend to hear or tend to see the most in our population. And so how do we get around these barriers? What do we do to make volunteerism a way of life? So the first thing is just find something you enjoy. Stop and reflect. What do you like to do? Do you like to teach others? Are you a good listener? Do you like to play with dogs? Do you like to be outside? Stop and evaluate what you enjoy doing, and I can guarantee you that there is something that you can do in volunteerism that can apply to that. So some of the ways I'm going to list to volunteer with you might be aware of, such as volunteering with your church. That's probably one of the most accessible areas to volunteer with, is your church, leading out in your Sunday school or your Sabbath school class, just helping pick up trash outside. For those of you that are a little bit more adventurous, you might consider volunteering as a coach for a Little League team, or offering your services in tutoring the younger generation, and maybe in reading or in math. There's no limit to what you can do in serving. You just have to find something that you enjoy, because volunteerism should be a pleasure. It shouldn't be a chore that you do. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how you can serve here at Loma Linda and how Loma Linda serves. Loma Linda tends to be known for its global service. We do an amazing job of going overseas and leading medical brigades. We also do a lot of work here in the community that a lot of people might not be aware of. And so LLU Serve, this little graphic here, is something that my office, the CAPS office, and the SIMS office came up with as something to draw attention to the service that we do here on campus. And so, as I mentioned right at the beginning, my role is to connect Loma Linda University with meaningful opportunities in the community. So we don't just work with our own students, we work with our staff and even community members to make these opportunities happen. So one thing that we do that might be a little bit different is we tend to focus on long-term programs. We don't do a whole lot of one-day events such as picking up trash or beautification projects. We've decided to focus more on sustainable programs that are meeting a need in the community. So we do a lot of mentoring, especially with high school youth. We do a lot of tutoring, academic tutoring, and we do a lot of just helping the community and ourselves know how to stay healthy and lead healthy lives. And so this is one way that you can get involved with our volunteer opportunities. This is our online volunteer management system, and appropriately enough, it's called Samaritan, named after the Good Samaritan that was helping others. So if you go to LLUH, communityvolunteers.org, this is our university portal for volunteerism, and so you can see all of our listings for upcoming events within the next 90 days, but we do always post new activities. You can see where it's at, what sort of activity you would be doing, and decide if it's going to fit within your schedule. If you're not sure what you want to do, you just want us to let you know of upcoming events, you can sign up for that as well. And what we do is we try and match you with upcoming events that meet your interests. So your interests could range from arts and crafts, working with kids, translation, say you're fluent in another language. It could even be manual labor or sports. We have a lot of activities that fall within those interest areas. So if we see that an event is coming up that meets your interest area, then we would contact you and encourage you to apply and serve for that opportunity. And on the other side of that, we know that a lot of you have ideas for ways to get involved with the community. And so there's another section that you can help us out with, and this is sharing an idea. So in the last 2 years, I've had 2 amazing programs that have started because of this portal here. One of them was a medical student. This is about 3 years ago. He came up to me and he said, I want to start a program for the community that focuses on drowning prevention. I want to teach kids how to stay safe in the water and to swim. Now, it didn't happen overnight, but after about 9 months or so, we were able to start this program. This volunteer and his classmates, they all got trained as water safety instructors, and so for the last 1.5 years, they've been serving as our volunteers for this wonderful program called Tigers Water Safety. And because of their passion, they have been able to help over 140 kids learn how to swim and stay safe in the water. So because he was so passionate about volunteerism, he was able to see through this commitment. And most recently, I had an employee here at the hospital reach out to me. He's a nurse in our surgical hospital, and he really had a passion for connecting with local high school students. He teaches SAT classes on his time off. He mentors youth, and he says, I want to get high school students into our system. I want to expose them to our hospital and get them excited about the health careers. And so together we were able to create this program that we've now done 3 times for high school seniors. They get to go into the surgical hospital, into the OR, and just see all the machines and see what these doctors and nurses do every day. And so it was because of their sharing an idea that we were able to offer these services to the community. And so as we leave here today, I want you to be successful in your next volunteer endeavor. And so I have a few tips for how to make volunteering more fun and more impactful, both for you and for the community. So number 6, assess your skills and personality. What are you good at? What do you enjoy? Are you a real people person? Do you like to be in front of people and talking to strangers? Or are you a little bit more reserved and prefer to be in the background? You should ask yourselves those questions so that you can be placed in an opportunity that's meaningful to you. Next, what's your passion? For some people, their passion lines up very nicely with what their career is. So if you're a nurse, you may be passionate about health, and you may decide that you want to volunteer on your day off at a free health clinic or at a free health fair. For other people, they don't want to volunteer in something that they normally do every day, so they may find something that is the complete opposite of what they do on a normal basis and what they get paid for. So whatever your passion is, try and follow that. Next, bring your family. This is one way to make volunteerism a part of your life and not just something that you do once a year. As we talked about before, you'll be modeling a positive behavior for your family to emulate in the future. And so much of what we do today with our families is centered just around sitting down. You know, we may go out to dinner together, we may have a family meal at home, or we may be watching a movie. But get your family out of the house and doing something not for yourselves, but for others in the community. Next, communicate and ask questions. For me, this is probably the most important and the one that I feel very passionately about. Since we do offer so many programs, this is always an important part of what we do or what we try and do, is before the volunteer starts, they should have some sort of orientation process. It doesn't have to be long. It may be about 5 minutes, but enough time for the volunteer to understand what's expected of them and to clarify any questions that they might have. So mind you, sometimes you're going to be volunteering in a place that's very busy, and it may slip their minds to go through some of the rules or expectations. If this is not offered to you, make sure you ask questions. It's going to make your time with that organization a lot more meaningful, and you're going to be a lot more helpful for the organization as well. And next, be flexible. You may have signed up to help with one particular area, but the reality is they might have an urgent need for something completely different when you arrive. This happened to us on Monday. We were having a youth soccer camp. It was about 15 minutes into the program, and the group that was supposed to be leading out in the soccer camp had to cancel at the very last minute. And so the volunteers that we had on board, they were expecting just to kind of be in the background and assisting, but in that scenario, those volunteers had to step up and really take charge of the whole operation, and they did a wonderful job because they were flexible and willing to help out where the need was at. And most importantly, come with an open heart and be willing to serve. This shouldn't be something that you drag yourself or your kids to kicking and screaming. There should be a joy and a delight. Service and volunteerism shouldn't be just something that we do, but something that we do. It's part of who we are. And so how powerful would it be if we as an organization or as a community were not known as, oh, Loma Linda, they're on the hill, they're the ones at the hospital, or San Bernardino, we're only known because we were once bankrupt. We want to be known for something positive. We want to be known for how helpful our community is and just the change that we're making in the lives of others. So let that be your goal. And in closing, I want to leave you with the wise words of the Venerable Dr. Seuss. If you take nothing else from this today, I want to leave you with these words: why serve? because you can't rely on somebody else to serve. It has to be you that does it. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And so if you have any questions or you want to find out more ways to get involved in the community, please don't hesitate to contact our office. My email is there, or you can go visit our website for more information on upcoming events and opportunities. Thank you.
So we do have a few questions. One of the questions here is kind of long, is within the context of pursuing wholeness, especially with such a struggle with basic work-life balance, how do we carve out time for something like volunteerism that is more, in quotation marks, extracurricular?
That's a very important question, and I think it starts with your organization. If they model this behavior and if they're open to having you spend your time volunteering, that obviously makes it easier. So don't be afraid to ask your supervisor, and maybe encourage this as an activity that the whole office can do together. There's a lot of research on there, which I didn't get into just because we didn't have a lot of time, that shows the benefits that volunteerism can have for the workplace. So it improves your time management skills. It gives you just a wealth of other knowledge that you wouldn't get otherwise. And the other thing I would mention is don't expect to do everything at once. It starts slowly. So don't focus on making a commitment for the entire year. Maybe just start, what can I do this month? Maybe I'm only free on Sundays, so I'm going to find something that I can do just on Sundays. As if you look at it from the whole year perspective, it might become a little bit overwhelming. You have a gift whether you know it or not. We have a need for all skill sets, and sometimes we just need humans, just simple manpower to get things done. A lot of the need that we have just in our events is simple things, just pointing people in the right direction, being a source for directions, being a source for registration, and just keeping things organized. Although that might not seem like a lot to you for your organization, that can pretty much make or break an event just in terms of the flow and the impact that they have on that day.
And the last question we have here is, what is your most memorable volunteer experience?
Oh, okay. That's a really good question. So the things that I have been volunteering with lately tend to be a bit more on the weekends, but I remember my freshman year of college, we did a campus-wide day of volunteerism. And for me, it was so impactful just to see the whole school. We took the whole day off of school. The professors went with us, and we made a huge impact in the city. Everybody did something different. So some people weeded gardens, some people went to homeless shelters, but just seeing how much impact we could make in one day always stayed with me.
Very nice. But I want to thank you so much for being with us today. And also, one of the things that we want to emphasize is when we think about wholeness or when we think about wellness, a lot of times we think about exercise and nutrition. That's a lot of, the conversation goes toward those two topics. However, hopefully today, after hearing Tina and this wonderful presentation, you really think about service as being part of your wellness and wholeness journey, because service can truly change one's life. And so one of the things that I want to remind you, thank you again for joining us though, want to remind you that we will have another Wellness Live next month, and that will be on April 27th, right here at 5:30, and it will be Dr. Ron Ray, and he is going to be talking to us about cardiovascular exercise. So if you're ready for that workout, Dr. Ray will be here with a great presentation. My name is Dr. Olivia Moses, and thank you for joining us for Wellness Live.